Evolution works by a natural selection of mutations in organisms. A mutation is a change in DNA, the hereditary material of life. An organism's DNA affects how it looks, how it behaves, and its physiology. So a change in an organism's DNA can cause changes in all aspects of its life. Mutations are essential to evolution. They are the raw material of genetic variation. Mutations can range in their benefit and magnitude. Mutations can be detrimental to the reproductive chances of an organism, they can be neutral, or they can be beneficial. Beneficial mutations are sustained in the environment through reproduction, while organisms with the detrimental mutations will die out. Barring mutations that affect the inherent health of an organism, environmental factors determine if a mutation is detrimental, neutral, or beneficial. This concept is absolutely crucial in understanding human biodiversity. If we are to accept the out-of-Africa theory of human evolution, Homo sapiens started in sub-Saharan Africa. This environment is in the tropical zone near the equator and does not have 4 differentiated seasons like in temperate biomes. Humanity began as hunter-gatherers and moved with their source of food. This survival strategy is entirely viable in this environment. Sub-Saharan Africans were able to sustain themselves off of food acquired day to day, and were not forced to think in terms of seasons or years in order to survive. Now, when humanity moved north to the Egyptian Nile region and into Mesopotamia, humanity underwent the agricultural revolution. This shifted human society from a hunter-gatherer survival strategy to that of settlements. The agricultural revolution did not spread to all of humanity instantly. There were simultaneously existing traveling nomadic hunter-gatherer tribes as well as those people who lived in settlements. For those that lived in agrarian communities, after harvesting the crops they found that they actually had a surplus of food. The benefit of thinking long-term, work undertaken months ago and paying off in the future, allowed them to have food security. This food surplus meant that not all members of that community had to be engaged in the procurement of food. This bounty of food was attractive to the nomadic hunter-gatherer communities of humans who would then raid the settlements and steal the food in which they had no hand in creating. To counter this, the settlements allowed for a separate class in their society, fully fledged warriors, enabled by that food surplus. These warriors would protect the agricultural lands and their fellow agricultural cohabitants from raiding hunter-gatherer tribes. Those with the genetic predisposition to think long-term and establish these civilizations were able to prosper. They increased the carrying capacity of their environment, no longer had to travel with their food source, and they had defined roles in their society. Systems of writing began, first as a counting mechanism for trade, and then encompassed the spoken word. The surplus of food not only enabled the creation of a warrior class, but also allowed for metallurgy, artisans, healers, administrators, merchants, holy men, and eventually allowed for advancements in philosophy. As hunter-gatherers, they would all have to be preoccupied with the pursuit of food, but now they were able to have specialized roles in society and exchange their output for food. Genetic predispositions influence an ethnic group's thought patterns, which influence their culture, which in turn influences their laws and system of government. Better nutrition also allows developing minds of children to grow and become more intelligent. Higher intelligence is required for a greater sense of community, empathy, and long-term thinking. This is why there was an emergence of codified virtues and social norms due to the understanding of cause and effect. The actions of a singular person can affect the entire social order. Social order and communal cooperation meant the difference between starvation and prosperity. Enforcement of these laws by banishment or the death penalty became an environmental factor in shaping what genetics remained in that community. The overly aggressive, the lazy, those that committed theft, etc., were pruned from the genetic pool to create a greater society. Humanity had a hand in its own evolution to become a more civilized organism. In conjunction with natural evolution, this artificial evolution helped differentiate agrarian Homo sapiens from the hunter-gatherer Homo sapiens, not to the point to create a new species, mind you, but just of that of a different subspecies. The various ethnic groups or races of humanity are the exact same, biologically speaking, as different breeds of dogs. Different breeds of dogs are capable of interbreeding, but their genetic groupings produce distinctive traits. The same genetic variations that produce different physiological traits also create different cognitive traits. That is why different breeds are known to have different strengths, weaknesses, temperaments, and instincts. Human beings are subject to these same natural laws. It is safe to say that if pit bulls and beagles were allowed to form a society, that they would have vastly different cultures due to their instincts, temperaments, and physical capabilities. Social norms and systems of government produced by a particular ethnic group embody and harmonize with the expressions of those genetic traits. Intellectual advancements and social institutions developed or adopted by groups of people would permeate through the population. This would become a shaping environmental factor, which helped determine the chances of reproductive success for a given genetic mutation, such as being able to think long term. For example, in Northern Europe, those that did not think ahead and chop enough firewood for the harsh winters often froze to death. That's saying nothing of the hundreds of years of international ethnic war between the European powers, which, over time, honed the European races like a blade on a sharpening wheel. The interplay between genetics, culture, society, laws, and evolution also occurred for other agrarian societies as well. Europe, the Middle East, and the Far East agrarian civilizations benefited from a constant flow of goods and ideas between each other and built upon each other. Sub-Saharan Africans, cut off by the northern desert, could not benefit, or were even aware of, the exchange of ideas from agrarian parts of the world. Due to this isolation, culturally, politically, and technologically, Sub-Saharan Africa, up until very recently, was still in the Stone Age. Contrast that to Europe, which had been developing into complex societies and economies. The end of the religious wars in Europe created the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. This was the basis for national self-determination. National self-determination is the idea that nations of people are able to determine for themselves their government and society without external interference. This is in agreement to what I said earlier, that an ethnic group's social norms and systems of government embody and harmonize with the expressions of those genetic traits. This is extremely important to understand for the next part. Modern Western European nation-states that are built by an ethnic group that not only has the genetic predispositions to harmonize with such a system, but also possess a compatible culture, a prepared society, and have a shared history that can accept such a system. The European American founders of the United States used concepts from the Renaissance, the Enlightenment philosophers, and even mathematics to form their governmental system. This governmental system harmonized greatly with their cognitive predispositions for a yearning of freedom, self-sufficiency, and notions of justice. Now, when we try to impose this Western European style of government into regions of the world that do not have those shared genetics, social preparedness, and cultural compatibility, racially blind politicians and intellectuals are baffled at why the populace of a different ethnic group would not accept such a system. During colonization, European powers gave Africans much in the way of state-of-the-art infrastructure, but yet it has fallen unto ruin since decolonization. Sub-Saharan Africans lack the predisposition to think long-term. They were just simply never forced to have that trait enforced. There may be some statistical outliers that do have that long-term thinking skill, but since there was never an environmental factor to promote that trait, to make it a necessity to survive, it never became widespread. We have to remember that Sub-Saharan Africans are located in the same region of the world as our ape ancestors. They have not encountered a significant environmental difference that helped shape them further from the great primates, as opposed to those who left Africa. This is why ethnic nationalism is the most legitimate form of governance. It ensures that the system of government harmonizes with the people of which it has authority. It allows for self-determination of peoples, and to impose foreign systems and institutions on multiple ethnic groups is trying to force a square peg through a round hole. A multi-ethnic state will surely have social and governmental strife as they strain to conform to a system which their cognitive predispositions and cultural backgrounds are opposed.